It's another edition of our Secpe Get Footprint videos, and today I'm going to be talking about resources. It's a topic that I get asked questions on the absolute most, simply because there are so many entrepreneurs, business owners who all struggle with one very important thing, which is how do I get the best resources for my company? And I am not even going to tell you that I have a 100% proof response to that. But my failures, yes, in particular, my failures have allowed me to amass a wealth of knowledge and information that, if I can share with you, can perhaps prevent you from going down that same path. So here are the three things that I am going to speak to that I think you absolutely need to do in hiring in Africa. Now, let me say this. One of my virtual mentors, Marcus Lemonis, from a show called The Prophet, that he's a billionaire. He is originally from Lebanon, was adopted by individuals, actually Chrysler owners in Florida, and grew up wealthy, but with a lot of discipline. And he understood earlier on in his businesses that the key to the success of his business was not necessarily the clients, it was his resources. And I dare say that that is the same all over the world. If you see a very good organization or company in Africa, you will know that it is so because of the individuals that serve you. Our hospitality industry is a big deal, but it's not the only thing that we should be known for. There are many areas of growth in our continent, and I think human resources is one of those areas. So I can tell you why we have these problems, but I don't think that will serve you. What will serve you is how do we cross that obstacle, right? We cross those challenges. So number one, I'm going to put the responsibility on you. Know your business and know what you're hiring for. My biggest challenge when I first started was I didn't know what I wanted. I knew I needed help. And that's trickier in a company where you need individuals to be accountable for their own work. It's slightly more easy if you have an established brick and mortar business and you're looking for a role of, say, a cashier, or you have a service business and you need a waitress. They are fairly defined roles across the board. But in other places, and again, not only are they fairly defined, but the scope of work is limited and structured in a manner that offers duplication in a highly successful manner. You think of the McDonald's enterprise that used to have their cashiers buttons be actual products. You press French fry, as opposed to having to key in the value of the French fry to facilitate the transaction and ensure that there are less human errors. Well, that kind of precision is very difficult in most industries where you rely on your employees to navigate through the concern, navigate through the experience in order to offer the best service. So the best thing I will say to you is know the role, and then understand if it's duplicatable, and then if it is, understand, does this need an educated individual, someone with an aspiring need and want to do better for themselves? Or is this a job that is repetitive and duplicatable in a manner in which it's more what I would call a factory sort of work, where anyone can be trained how to do it and do it consistently and competitively and be paid? Why do I say make that distinction? Too often we get it crossed. Whenever you're hiring, they will tell you whatever it is you need to know. Now, there are no infrastructure for resource allocations, tracking, understanding, where someone worked before, that's limited, right? We're going to talk about that in a minute, but it is limited. So when you are hiring and you have a role, you want to know how much work does this person need to do in my store and how much work do they need to do when they're not in my store. Because people who really want to do good, they think about their job outside of work, right? I always tell my employees, I can educate you so far, but your wealth of knowledge will come from the work you do outside of here to improve yourself. That makes you more marketable. So if you know that you have that kind of a high visible role, then you're going to have to take an extra special time to look for that individual who will fit that role. And I will strongly encourage you to write it down. Write down what it is that you need that person to do. And the way I write it is as if it was me. Because it's my company, I need an administrative assistant. And as my admin assistant, I want to be able to do this. I want them to be able to record conversations. I want them to be able to respond if I'm not there. I want them to be able to track that information, document it, the precision you want them to provide in the services that they deliver to your clients. And if you have that vision for your company, then again, writing it down is essential. So the first thing I recommend is have you written it down. And when you write it down, read it to yourself and say, who can do this? Is this someone who has a certain level of education in a certain field? Because, agriculture, technology, what is it? Medical, I don't know. So you know better than I do, right? How much knowledge do they need to have in that field? And then, excuse me, you're going to say, this is the type of person I'm looking for, right? That's the first thing. If you go to Africa and you've opened up a company like, I need employees, there are 1,000 who will show up. Jobs is a huge thing. Again, people's livelihood in Africa is far and few between. The average salary of an individual a month ranges from $100, sometimes less, to perhaps $2,000-$3,000 a month. So it is very important for you to understand that everyone just wants to contribute in return for bread, in return for money. So in order for you to not get frustrated, know what you're looking for. Number one. Number two, you must do the interview. Do not let someone else do an interview for you. Meet them, know them, and then test them. You can always test them. In some countries that are bilingual, test their bilingual skills. Anyone will tell you to speak English and French. I can speak French very well sometimes, but I don't write it as well. Test them. Give them a story. Give them a scenario. I remember in one of my consulting gigs, I had made a recommendation for everyone who wanted to come into the company to write an essay. We had close to 100 people interview, and I needed them to write an essay about a scenario that had occurred and how they responded to it. They needed to tell me what happened. They needed to tell me how they responded to it, and then tell me what they could have done in the future to either improve that process or prevent that from happening again. That was probably the most eye-opening thing I've ever done in terms of understanding the mindset of my potential employees. You understand how they write, you understand how they think, you understand what the scope of their world is, because we all respond based on our box, right? You can understand that just from that one essay, because some individuals, they shined in terms of what they wrote. It was clear, it was precise, what happened. Their recollection was fluid. It made sense. And their response also made sense. But what was really important to me was what they identified was the cause and how to avoid that in the future, or if not, what to put in place to mitigate these types of concerns when they do occur. So testing them is important. I know some people don't feel like they have the time. The best thing you can do for yourself is test your employee. It's actually more for them, so you can put them in the right place. And when you test them, it's not a test they have to take home. It's a test they have to do right in front of you while you're there, so you can make sure that they are the individuals who are actually responding. And I also always do a one-on-one. Even if it is someone who's going to help me, clean up the place, like a janitor, I will still do one-on-one. I want to get to know you, know your family, what's important to you, because those things make sense. The third thing, and this is weird, right? When I'm going to tell you, the third thing in Africa is people will give you a CV. Might be accurate, might be true, might not be. Hey, I know people have had to, plagiarize their CV or their resume a little bit, so I'm not going to fault anyone for that. But how sure are you that they even have the experience that they say they have, even if they get really high marks on that test? Number 3, find someone to vouch for them. If you can find an individual that can give you a stellar recommendation, either because they worked for them, or better yet, they worked for them. Either they worked with them, or better yet, they worked for them. That is actually one of the better ways to hold someone accountable. In Africa, our reputation is key. And we believe our belief system is one that is really centered around how the community sees you. And if your elder sees you in a poor light, it doesn't look so good on you and everything that you do. So when you can have a senior vouch for you, an elder in that community, it goes a long way to talking about your integrity, your credibility. It also helps if there is a situation or misunderstanding, how to resolve those internally and not be brought to some tribunal. Most countries in Africa, their laws favor the employees. I repeat, most countries in Africa, their labor laws favor employees. Understanding that they have little recourse, they tend to lay the burden on the employer. So if they go running to any legal ministry or any individual police for help, the tendencies is for them to be sympathetic to their plight, and for these ministries and these legal entities to come after you, the employer, for compensation. So if you have that connection with someone they know, and I understand that in most modern worlds, that is kind of a tricky situation because you're crossing boundaries, right? You're going into the personal area. This is one of those cases where you have to do that. You have to know who their uncle is. You have to know who the grandmother is, so that if there's a situation, they can intervene or serve as a arbitrator, right? If you know where they live, it's even better. So knowing them a little bit more is going to be the last step. And let me say this, all these 3 things I'm telling you is in addition to the usual work you need to do, right? You need to do the interviews, go through the resumes, look for the CVs, call them, and do all that. The other thing that I do, and it's something that's normal, is I do personality tests. I use crystalknows.com to find out what the personality type is. So those are all the extras that we do in most developed worlds that developing countries tend not to do. I still do it. But in Africa, number 1, make sure you know what your position is that you want. Number 2, ensure that you test them. Yes, they're going to come here. Interview them one-on-one, but test them. But beyond all belief. You won't believe it. Know who they are, because if they come from that family, if they come from that area and they share those values with you, and they believe that stealing is not good, and they have a faith-based environment, and they understand that being accountable is part of life, it does make your work a little bit more easy. It does allow you to depend on them, and maybe, just maybe, it will allow your company to soar. I hope you found something here, a little nugget that helps you. If you have any questions, any concerns, give me a call. Oh, and one other thing, don't be fooled. Doesn't matter the age. Younger, older, you might see a little older, tech-wise, might be such. And the younger generation might be a little easier because they're techy, and they're social media. But know your role. For some ways where you don't need to have them so close. And those ways where you fire the activities. But know your role. It goes up to your role. For the question. Look at some Facebook, everywhere you can subscribe to it, get your thoughts on it. It's really, really I'm probably going to read some other individuals to tell you about their stories. I don't want to scare you. Some of them are not so good. But I want you to know that there are really a number of really good employees back home. I have a few, and you can too. Have a good one. Bye.